Good evening, folks. Good to be with you on this Facebook Live. We're waiting for folks for other people to join in. I hope everyone is doing well, and we hope that everyone has already voted early. We think it's very, very important. If you haven't voted early and you plan on voting in person, that's fine. That's fine. But the main thing is get out to vote. That's the most critical thing that you can do, is not only for you to vote and your family and your friends, but encourage others to vote as well. Want to just give you a little piece of information. I represent 9 counties. This is Brian Babin, of course. I represent the 36th district of the state of Texas, 9 counties, basically from the city of Houston all the way over to Louisiana line, and then up to Jasper, Newton, Tyler, and Polk counties, and other counties as well. I want to report today that we had a derailment down in Mauriceville in Orange County. We understand there's been no casualties, and they're cleaning it up. We've been on top of it. I know the local officials down there and emergency folks have been working very hard since this derailment, and we're glad of that. I want to say thank you to those first responders and all those involved. There was an evacuation of a nearby school. Thank goodness nothing more than that had happened. It's the information that we got. So let's see, as soon as we get started here, well, we want to ask you and encourage you to ask questions about the election, about the political atmosphere of the country. Never seen anything like this in my life. There's just a lot of really some ill will, some rancor, but there's a lot of excitement out there for, I know there is, for President Trump. He's drawing crowds of 20 and 30,000 people as he travels around this country. It's amazing how much energy this our president has. It's just quite amazing. And so we want you to type in your questions in the chat box. If you have a question, just give us your name and type your question in. If you can, tell us where you're from too. We would appreciate that. We're getting ready to go ahead and get started. Again, this is the most important election of my lifetime, and I'm thinking it could very easily be the most important, significant election in the whole 243 years of our great republic of the United States of America. Because I will tell you that we are at a crossroads, and those crossroads, one which will lead, we've seen on it, we've been on it for the last 4 years. We've seen the best economy we've seen in 70 years under this president, because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, because of our president standing up for American workers and small businesses and American industry, bringing industry and jobs back home for the first time in many, many decades. And we had the lowest unemployment rate in over 60 years. The lowest unemployment rate in the history of our country for minorities, for Hispanics, for blacks, for Asians. An amazing record that this president has created a great economy in this country. And until COVID-19 hit us in February, and we were in a self-imposed lockdown, and folks, the lockdown needs to be lifted. We need to go back to work. We need to be careful. We need to make sure that we're taking very great precautions, especially for those who are the elderly or have underlying health concerns. So I'm going to get started. We are going to talk about some of the conditions that we're seeing today. I'm going to give you a little history first. Texas, the great state of Texas, the Lone Star State, has not voted for a Democrat president since the year 1976. Texas is the bedrock, the very foundation of every Republican president since 1976 to win the Electoral College. We have 38 Electoral College votes. It is absolutely imperative for our candidates, the Republican candidates for president, to win the great state of Texas. Without winning Texas, we don't win the presidency. That's why the Democrats have us in their sights. That's why they're going all out to see if they can flip Texas blue. Our state has experienced unprecedented growth. And that's a proud thing to be able to say for us, for we Texans, for the last several decades. The reason we grow is because Texas families, like my very own family, are staying here in Texas. And we're growing with every single generation. And other Americans from other states are relocating to the state of Texas. Most of these people are coming from Democrat-run states. Many of them are coming from New York, from Illinois, from California. And yes, we have illegal immigrants who have crossed our border as well. And they've had children here. And those children are citizens. But we're going to talk more about that later. And so I'm just telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen out there, time for complacency is over. We must not be complacent. In 2016, our president, Donald J. Trump, beat crooked Hillary Clinton by 9 points in the great state of Texas, 52 to 43%. But just 2 years later, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Francis O'Rourke, who you might know by his alias as Beto, lost to our great Senator Ted Cruz by only 3 points. So within 2 years, it was a very close race. Now let me show you a map. This is a map. I want you to look at this map. This is Texas. Look at all the red. Those are Republican counties. The blue, of course, are Democrat counties. This map does not tell you the whole picture, folks. During the last election, these metro areas all have now gone to the Democrats. Fort Worth was the last to go. I'm going to put 2018 up here. You'll see that Fort Worth is now in blue. That was the last metropolitan city that we have in Texas to go. And so we have a very big challenge. It looks like most of Texas, geographically, it's a huge percentage of Texas is Republican. But when you come to the population centers, that's where we're losing in the big cities. In Houston's Harris County, we have lost almost every meaningful elected position in just the last 4 years. Now, here's some numbers on early voting turnout. In 2016, the total turnout for Harris County, Houston, Texas, and this is inclusive of early voting plus voting day. This is the total vote. In 2016, we had 1,338,898 votes. That's 1.338 million. In 2018, 2 years later, the total vote was 1.219 million. So it was less in 2018. But as of 2020, as of today, 4 p.m. today, in early voting, this, of course, we haven't gotten to the voting date yet on November the 3rd, but early voting alone, we have 1.3,281,000 votes in early voting so far. It is a record turnout. That's why it's so crucial that our folks get out and vote and get people out there. Remember, if you have a question, write it up in your chat box so that we will know what your question is and we will try to get to that. So remember, you can vote early all the way through tomorrow, but if you have to wait until Election Day, then please do it then. Just make a plan today to know when and how you're going to the polls to vote. So what do we do about it? We vote. That's how we win. I represent one of the most solidly conservative districts in the country. President Trump, Senator Cornyn, and I are going to do great out here in Southeast Texas next Tuesday. But that makes it even more important that we show up to vote. We want a turnout. A big turnout will carry the entire state, not only for Senator Cornyn, but most importantly of all, for the Electoral College votes, those 38 electoral votes for President Trump. He's got to have them. It makes that much more important. We have to show up and then get you and your neighbors, your families to go and vote and gin up and get this statewide tally up. That's what has to happen. What happens if Texas conservatives like you don't show up? Nothing good, I can tell you. But here's just a sample of what can happen. The presidential election is over. The president and Republicans across the country are counting on Texas and our 38 electoral college votes for any scenario to win the electoral college. This is a hypothetical, folks. This is not really, the election is not over. I'm just giving you a hypothetical. If we don't show up and vote because we assume that Texas is in the bag and we have it, we will be letting President Trump and the Republicans across the country down. And more importantly, we will be ushering in a new president who is nothing but a puppet for the radical Marxist special interests of the far left Democrat Party. This is not your grandpa's Democrat Party anymore, folks. This is the Marxist leftist communist party and they've kept the name Democrat. But with their plans for us, and we'll go over some of those plans, it is spooky. It is scary what they have in store for us as Americans. Secondly, going Democrat by just one vote will be weaponized as a mandate. The Democrats will say, oh, okay, it was a close race, but we took it. This is an endorsement of all of our radical Democrat socialist policies. And like getting rid of the oil and gas industry, opening our borders up, raising taxes and killing jobs. These are the things that Joe Biden has promised, and so is running mate Kamala Harris. Remember, you can ask a question by using the chat box below. And when you push to enact the Biden-Harris AOC and squad agenda to defund the police, open up the border, and raise our taxes, the first thing they're going to do is to point to the map and say, hey, look, Texas even voted for us. Conservative Texas went for the Democrats. Folks, we cannot let that happen. Your children, your grandchildren, your future great-grandchildren, and you may be a 20-year-old, you may be an 18-year-old. This is your future. This is your future. And finally, most of the people who just arrived in our state are going out to vote for only one reason. They hate Trump. And I hear people say, I just can't vote for Trump. Well, I tell them, you're not just voting for Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, you're voting not for Trump, you're voting for free enterprise. You're voting for freedom and liberty. You're voting for a strong military, a secure border, lower taxes, traditional family values, our Christian Judeo foundation, the Constitution of our country, the very bedrock that we're counting on to continue us another 243 years. That's what you're voting for, not necessarily Donald Trump. But Donald Trump has made these decisions, and he has led our country very ably in this direction. He may not say everything that is pleasing to you, but he has done what he has promised during his campaign in 2016. But that means they hate Trump, and they won't have a clue about anything else on this ballot. And they're just going to fill out the rest of it by voting for whoever has a D or a Democrat next to their name. And that means that a Democrat Speaker of the Texas legislature, if they kick out our Republican majority in the state legislature here in Texas, that means we will have a Democrat Texas Speaker of the House. More Democrat members in the U.S. House, where I serve, in the U.S. Congress. They will carry water for Nancy Pelosi, and a complete takeover of our local positions by big government, tax and spend liberals like Judge Lena Hidalgo over in Harris County. Let me close with this before I get on to some of your questions. I am the co-chairman of the United States House of Representatives Border Security Caucus. And as a representative from Texas, one of my absolute top priorities for our state and our country is to ensure that our southern border is secured and protected. An open border is dangerous and deadly and bad for America on all levels, whether it be terrorism, crime, taking Americans' jobs, public health, people coming across that we don't check, and they may be carrying COVID or any other disease that they may be, and they don't necessarily have to come in from Mexico. They come in from over 100 different countries, flood in through our southern border. And they could be coming over from Congo and have Ebola. these are some of the things that we have to sweat out. And so, I am not opposed to immigration, but I will tell you it has to be done legally, and immigration has to benefit the United States of America. We cannot have open borders the way Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the radical Dems want to have. So, we've got to make sure our southern border is securely protected, and plus we also have another problem, our western border. Let me tell you what I'm talking about our western border. Every year, thousands of residents of California have been packing up and leaving the once so-called Golden State for jobs and opportunities afforded by our business-friendly, low-tax Texas way of life. We're friendly to people. We have friendly laws, low taxes, no state income tax here. People like to come to Texas. Our crime rate is low. And life is very, very good in the state of Texas, and it's not very good out in California. But we have to be very careful. The very policies, the very attitudes and voting patterns that ruined California, Illinois, New York, and many other states along with them. We all know that Austin has always been a little weird. But in these days, it is out of control. If you walk the streets of Austin there today, you might think you're in Berkeley, California. It is not the same Austin it used to be several decades ago. If we don't mobilize and act, it won't be long before every major city in our state looks more like San Francisco, and more like San Francisco than San Antonio. But just remember, these people are coming over from California and other states, and in their U-Haul, they're putting all their belongings, but they're also putting their Democrat voting habits in that U-Haul as well and bringing them here. And so, if it turns blue, we turn Texas into another California. That would be a disaster. Go look at San Francisco. Go look at the homeless population in many cities like Los Angeles, where you have squalor, you have human excrement, needles and all kinds of drug paraphernalia. It is just awful, and we cannot have this happen to the great state of Texas. So finally, I told you I would talk about this later, and this is the time. We must talk about the problem of anchor babies. This is a problem that is real, folks. As it currently stands, anyone from anywhere in the entire planet Earth can come here, give birth, and that baby is a U.S. citizen as long as they are inside our borders at the time. It's crazy, it's wrong, and it encourages both birth tourists. There's a business out there that brings people over from countries like China and other countries where they come over, have a baby here, and that baby then is a U.S. citizen. And also human traffickers who make the problem even worse. And a Biden administration will never address this problem through legislation or judicial action. And their open border policies will only make it worse. This anchor baby situation is only in existence because of an interpretation of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And it wasn't even interpreted like that. It was passed following the Civil War for babies of former slaves here in the United States. It didn't have anything to do with opening up our borders to someone who could come in from China, from Iran, from Argentina, or any other country just to come in and have a baby here and have that baby become a United States citizen. No other first world country has that situation. Nobody. It's insane that we have this. And roughly 750,000 to 900,000 babies a year are born in the United States to folks that come here, and then those babies become citizens, anchor babies. So I'd like to take some of your questions now. The first one I want to talk to is and hear from is John from Lumberton. Let's see, can Joe lock down Texas if he gets in the White House? Absolutely he can. He can lock Texas down. And if you watch the debates and listen to some of his rhetoric, even prior to the debates, he believes that we should have a mandate, a mask mandate across the country. He wants to take away your individual rights, a lockdown to keep your job in limbo, to close up your small business. If you work for a small business, you will be fresh out of a job. I can tell you, I voted for the CARES Act, which gave a lot of money in what we call the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which we have tried over and over again to renew and extend, and only one person has kept that from happening, and that is Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. And she has kept us from extending that. We are ready to have that pass at any point in time. Unfortunately, the House of Representatives agenda and our voting schedule is controlled by Nancy Pelosi. So we're at her mercy, and we want her to start negotiating in good faith. So yes, you bet Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can lock Texas down, and that would be absolutely bad. Also we got a direct message from Brittany in Deer Park, and she's asking what happens to the border wall if Joe wins. Well, Joe could tear the wall down. We know that he's threatened to do that. The radical side of the radical wing of the Democratic Party is in control of Joe Biden. And no one's more radical than his running mate, Kamala Harris. And they didn't want the wall to be built. They think walls are immoral. We know that walls work. As the Border Security Caucus co-chairman, I can tell you I've been down to the border numerous times, from Texas all the way across New Mexico, Arizona, and to California. California, there at the border near Tijuana, where just south of San Diego, had a 90% problem of border crossings illegally. After that border wall was built, it was cut down by 90%. 90%. Walls work. And those Democrats who say walls are immoral, look at some of them. They live behind walls in their mansions, like Mrs. Pelosi. She lives behind walls. And walls, if they're immoral, then that means they're immoral. But there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself and having a fence around your house. Immigration is fine, but it has to be done in a legal manner, and it has to benefit our country. We cannot open our borders up and drive ourselves to bankruptcy. They cost billions of dollars. They're coming over here, and many of them are getting on welfare, and many of them are bringing drugs in, human trafficking. We lose 70,000 Americans a year to drug overdoses. The enormous percentage of those drugs are coming in across the southern border run by the drug cartels in Mexico. Okay, let's see. Eric Bass, Congressman, is the moon mission still set for 2024? And you know one of the astronauts, right? Johnny Kim, who served with your son, Leif Babin. That must be awesome. Eric, thank you so much. Eric Bass, we appreciate that question. Yes, I know Johnny Kim real well. He served as one of the snipers on my son's SEAL team in 2006. What a capable guy Johnny Kim is. A Korean-American, smart, great guy, great sniper, great SEAL. Went back to school, was an enlisted man, went back to school, got his bachelor's, went on to Harvard Medical School, became a medical doctor. Didn't stop there. He applied. He was one of 18,000 applicants to take one of 12 astronaut positions. Only 12 positions open, 18,000 plus applications for 12 positions. Guess what? Johnny Kim got it. Great guy. He'll be flying on these rockets. And yes, you're right. We still are on track for 2024 to go back to the moon and the Artemis program. Artemis was the sister of Apollo. The Apollo program took, and this is in Greek mythology, Apollo was a Greek god, his sister was Artemis. Apollo took our astronauts to the moon, and now Artemis, the sister of Apollo, is going to take our astronauts back to the moon, and one of them will be a lady astronaut this time. So we think it's very, very significant that we're calling this program Artemis. So great question. I have been very honored to have served as the chairman of the subcommittee on space and aeronautics, and to be part of our space program. And what an exciting thing we have going. I've been to a number of our NASA facilities. I also represent Johnson Space Center down in Houston. We just sent 2 astronauts up on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket to go to the International Space Station. And yes, we are going to send American astronauts, not on Russian rockets, where we've had to pay $80 million a seat to the Russians to send up our own astronauts. We're not going to have to do that anymore because we have a successful program with SpaceX and their Falcon 9 rocket. Boeing is getting ready to have this as well. And then we have the giant SLS rocket, the Space Launch System, which will take our guys back to the moon. So let's go to the next one. Benjamin Newman Zumwalt. Why are the far left and some of the Democrats so scared to make it a law for you to show that show an ID, a photo ID to vote? Are they afraid of losing votes? Absolutely. The only thing I can say that in order to get anywhere, if you wanted to come into the Capitol building for a tour, if you've got to go into into any kind of a museum or something like that, you'd have to show, or if you're going to fly on an airplane or anything else, you show a photo ID. So what is the problem with having to show a photo ID to prove that you are who you say you are? We have seen over and over again. I know the Democrats are playing this down, but pick up the newspaper on any given day. There have been a number of voter fraud attempts right here in Texas, in Harris County, in Port Arthur, Texas, many places. And if we had photo IDs, they would be known. You could prove who they were. You have to be a citizen to vote in federal elections in the state of Texas. And, we need to make sure that people are citizens and they are who they purport to be when they show up. Absolutely, they're afraid. Well, they're afraid that any fraudulent person might be coming in. They may be voting for a dead person. This is why we're very concerned about all the mail-in ballots. And as a former veteran, as a veteran myself of the Army and Air Force, there's a great big difference between a solicited early voting or mail-in ballot versus an unsolicited one. If you're stationed overseas, you have to solicit, you have to ask for that ballot. That is a lot of difference between, and you can prove who that is sending those ballots in. If you have an unsolicited mail-in ballot, you didn't ask for it, it just shows up in your mailbox. Who the heck knows who signs that ballot and just mails it in? Who would know? There's too much room for fraud with this, and that's why we're very, very concerned. So let's go to the next one. Donna Toby, if Biden wins, can he force Texas to defund our law enforcement? Well, he could very easily be able to do that, depending on what type of funding that would be. If it was federal funding, and the feds have a lot of funding for law enforcement agencies to help them to buy equipment, to pay for special training, to do things of this nature. And Biden could say, we're cutting off your federal funds, folks, unless you cut all your police departments by 25 or 50%. And we were talking about Austin, Texas a while ago. Austin, Texas cut 1/4 of their police budget already. And we had a killing, a shooting, we had riots out there in Austin following the George Floyd killing up there. And then it went all over the country. And what does Austin do to try to control the chaos and arrest anarchists and try to establish law and order? No, they cut $150 million out of the Austin Police Department budget. And so that's why it's just crazy, absolutely crazy, for AOC and the radical Democrats to talk about closing down our police departments, closing down ICE for our border watch, our border patrol, closing down even prisons. It's just incredible. I've seen Democrat candidates for Congress calling on closing our military down and using that for social spending and services. We've got to have a military, folks. If we don't have the top military in the world, I can tell you bad things will happen from our adversaries like Russia and China, the Iranians, North Koreans, many other renegade, radical Islam. Some of those people, they're just waiting to make sure we become vulnerable. Let the Democrats close our military down. We are in big trouble. Okay, next question. Thank you. Alyssa Bird Dalton. When Trump wins the elections, is there a plan in place to deal with the rioters and looters? Absolutely. I've talked to the White House. He is very, very eager to try to help some of these cities. And quite frankly, most of these cities and counties where these rioters are taking place, where there's arson and murder and assaults and burning down businesses, looting, most of these are taking place in Democrat-controlled cities and counties. And most of their district attorneys are Democrats, their mayors, their city councils, their governors. They are just simply not only not prosecuting, but encouraging and saying these are peaceful demonstrations when you can look at the video and see people getting shot and beat up and looting taking place, assaults. It's horrible to watch. And yes, they're happening, and I can tell you that President Trump has offered more than once to send in help from federal officers to try to clean this up and try to protect American citizens. That's why people are saying, well, Minnesota, they've always been Democrat. Listen, the people who live up there in Minneapolis or in Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, they may be Democrats, but I can tell you when their businesses and their homes are burned, when they're assaulted, when their cars are burned, these people are more likely going to vote for law and order to get rid of this chaos and lawlessness. And so, yes, I think that President Trump will clean up this act and restore us to a law and order country where we should be. A country has got to have law and order. We've got to be based on the Constitution and following the law. If we don't, then it's open season on all U.S. citizens by predators. And that's what has been happening in our cities and towns, again, most of which are being controlled by local Democrats and simply don't want to enforce the law. Okay, if you want to ask a question, please use the chat box below so that we know if you have a question. We'd certainly like to hear it. Okay, a question I'm often asked is about Operation Warp Speed. Do I trust it? Will I take a vaccine? Operation Warp Speed is none other than an incredible, almost like a wartime footing program that President Trump's administration has put in place through the Food and Drug Administration, through our military, the many other agencies, HHS, private research, academia, to try to develop a vaccine for COVID-19 in a quick manner. And most of the time, I want you folks to know, it takes, and I'm a healthcare provider. I practice dentistry. In fact, right here in this very office, I practiced dentistry for 37 years. And I can tell you that it normally takes between 4 and 7 years to create a vaccine, to develop it, go through the trials, to manufacture it, get it passed, and out into the hands of those who administer the vaccines. Well, through Operation Warp Speed, which I'm so proud of this administration for having come up with, we are doing all of those things that I just said simultaneously. We're doing the human trials. We're doing the manufacturing. We're doing all of this at the same time. And that is going to shorten the time span from start to finish. And we are anticipating that we will have a COVID-19 vaccine, in fact, probably several, really quickly, probably by December or January. And I can tell you, as a healthcare provider, COVID-19 is not going to go away. It is a serious thing. We want to be sure and take it seriously. It's especially dangerous for those who are over 60 or who have underlying health conditions like diabetes and other conditions. Can be extremely dangerous. The death rate is very low now. That's around 1% or less. And with young people and children, it's unbelievably low. And so we need to open this country back up, but we still have to protect those very vulnerable populations like our elderly. We saw what happened up there in New York State when Governor Cuomo decided he was going to be smart and did not follow the instructions of the Center for Disease Control and the administration, Dr. Fauci and the rest of them. And when elderly people got sick with COVID, instead of keeping them in a hospital and isolating them, they sent these people and these COVID-infected elderly folks back into their nursing homes. And we've had over 10,000 deaths and counting because of that terrible decision on the part of Governor Cuomo. So yes, we will have a vaccine, and that's what Warp Speed is all about, Operation Warp Speed. Okay, Pamela Cargan-Niemann. Is it even feasible to think that the U.S. can power its infrastructure without using fossil fuels? Pam, that is such a great question, because the answer is obviously, if you've got a lick of sense out there, you know we can't power our entire grid. We can't power our infrastructure on existing technology for solar and wind energy. It just won't happen. And that's why people think they're doing something really great when they buy and they use an electric car or a hybrid car. And they feel like they're having a lot less of a carbon footprint. And you know, the sad thing is, if we could gin up and recharge these batteries in these cars with the same type of energy, with green energy, that would be great. But about 95% of these cars are being recharged by natural gas or coal-fired plants. And so, no, we can't run this country and the massive infrastructure and our economy and keep millions and millions of Americans employed and be the top economy in the world, the top military power in the world, on green energy. It just is not going to happen at this point in time. And the good news is that we have enough fossil energy in the ground, clean energy. This is gas, natural gas, one of the most clean burning fuels we have on the face of the earth. We've got enough oil and gas to last us for 200 or 300 years. And we've seen that Joe Biden say he wants to phase out our oil and gas industry. We have millions and millions of Americans, especially here in Texas and Louisiana, that are dependent upon the oil and gas industry for their jobs, for their livelihoods. And here's Joe Biden saying, and Kamala Harris and AOC and Elizabeth Warren and all that bunch, Bernie Sanders, want to get rid of fossil fuels, and thinking that we can get the country off of these green energy techniques and technology, which just will not happen, not for a while. We certainly want to continue to encourage it, but we must have energy. And I can tell you, this is why President Trump took us out of the Paris Climate Accords, because the American taxpayer does not need to subsidize the biggest polluter in the world, and that's China, while our people have to pay twice as much for their energy costs. And so, no, our energy industry has to be kept healthy, and it has to be kept viable. And you're looking at, as the congressman from the 36th Congressional District of Texas, we have more refineries, chemical plants, and plastics manufacturing, and we're the epicenter of energy in this country. And so it would be an absolute disaster if we did away with our oil and gas industry. And think about it. Texas is known for our oil and gas industry. Our entire economy is built around it. And before oil and gas, our entire economy was built around cattle. the Green New Deal. These same radical Democrats want to get rid of cows. Can you even imagine if we didn't have oil and gas and then we wouldn't have cattle? They want to get rid of cattle because they say they're flatulent. They emit too much methane and gas. So it's just incredible. These people don't think. They don't live in the real world. They have no common sense. And Americans need jobs. They need good jobs, paying jobs, to be able to keep up our standard of living. And that's the bottom line. Okay, that's what our next one is. The point of this call is to encourage all of you to get out and vote. Remember what I said at the beginning of this talk. Rural Texas, from El Paso to Orange, and from Brownsville all the way up to Amarillo, absolutely is responsible for keeping Texas red. Most of our metropolitan big cities have gone blue. And that doesn't mean that you folks that live in the big cities, you get out and vote, folks. You may be outnumbered by the Democrats, but it is crucial for rural Texas and those folks that live in these metropolitan areas, get out and vote. And don't hand me this line about, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count. It doesn't mean a hill of beans. Folks, your vote absolutely counts. We're depending upon it. Okay. If I didn't get to your question, I want you to send me a direct message and I'll get back with you absolutely as soon as possible. So I think I'm getting the hook here, and we're going to have to shut this thing down. And I know I didn't get to everybody's question, but I want to encourage you to please ask that. And remember, the bottom line and the purpose for this call is to get you, to energize you, to encourage you to get out and vote. The most important election of our lifetimes and possibly of the entire history of our country. Do we go socialist, Marxist, communist? Do we go atheist? Do we open our borders up to anyone that wants to come in, no matter who they are? They may be a terrorist. Or do we go to secure borders, law and order, maintain our police department, our military, and keep taxes low and have the greatest country in the world continue on? The future of America, ladies and gentlemen, is in your hands. I can't overemphasize how important that is. Get your people out and vote. Thank you so very much. I just wish you Godspeed. God bless you. God bless the great state of Texas. God bless America. Get out and vote. Thanks.